Our loving Heavenly Father, we know that time is short, but Father, there are many people who you want to impact with your health message and with your ability to heal them. And so we ask that you would sharpen our skills and help us to be the person who interacts with those who need help. We love you and praise you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay, so I told Guy when he came in that if he could read this equation, he would know what the class was about. Okay, this is a scientific notation, and it's simply, it's not magnesium, okay? It's not magnesium equals whatever. It is actually mass times gravity equals weight, okay? Okay, there it is. The mass of an object times the acceleration of gravity equals weight. Okay? Can you control gravity? No. Then you got to control the mass of the object. Okay? All right. So what I want to do today is I want to start a series. And this is kind of like the table of contents. In public speaking, they tell you that you should tell the people what they're going to hear, then tell them what they're hearing, and then tell them what they heard. Okay? So today, I'm going to tell you over the next few weeks what you're going to hear. Okay? And it's such a complex issue, we can't just say, okay, well, this will take about an hour and everybody will be able to lose all the weight they want. Okay? It's more than that. Okay? And so I've been studying this for years, and we want to make sure that people understand that sometimes there's issues that have to be resolved. And so let's go through these. Now, everybody in weight loss says one thing for sure. Calories in, calories out. What's that mean? Right. So we are going to eat, and then we're going to move, right? We're going to exercise, or we're going to have some sort of activity that burns those calories, okay? And so we're going to, both are important. This is moving pretty slow. Okay. But let me illustrate something. You can lose 300 calories by walking 3.5 miles in 60 minutes. Sounds like calories out, right? Okay, but look at this. Not eating 60 grams, 2.12 ounces of potato chips, you cannot consume 300 calories. Which is easier? Not eating what? The potato chip. It takes less time. You don't have to work it off. They are, and they used to have a commercial. Do you remember? You can't eat just one. So what does this 300 calories turn into? 1,200. The whole bag, right? Okay. So number one, there are some, like you said, you can't eat just one, because these are addictive foods. They are chemically built, right? Chemically built for us to want more. Okay. So the reality is that it's easier to change what you're eating than it is to walk for 60 minutes in order to get rid of the same 300 calories. So it's important for us to look at what we're eating. Now, I used to have a McDonald's hamburger in a bag. I've lost track of it now. But I had it for several years. I probably had it for no dead mice. But as long as you didn't touch it, it looked the same. As long as you didn't touch it, you couldn't tell that it wasn't fresh. The bun looked perfect. Now the bun was hard and the meat was hard, but none of it had spoiled. It had just petrified. Okay, so I used to use this hamburger in a demonstration. And I'd hold up a head of lettuce and this hamburger, and I said, which of these has more calories? Well, the reality is they both had the same amount of calories. They're both 500 calories, no matter which one you ate. So if we were to eat this little hamburger, about that big around and about that tall, pop it in our mouth, chew it up, swallow it, how long would that take? 3 minutes. Even less for some of us. Okay? Now, if we had a head of lettuce, I mean, a good hearty head of lettuce, how long would it take to eat that? It might take some of us 20 minutes, some of us might only take 10. But the reality is which one would fill you up more? The head of lettuce, right? If you ate a whole head of lettuce, that's a lot of roughage, right? Now, which one of them would give you the best physical result? The lettuce. It doesn't matter if it's, as a matter of fact, that was my point. The nutritive value of the two were not the same. The head of lettuce had more nutrition in it than the McDonald's hamburger. And the calories were the same. The calories were 500 apiece. And so, if you were to eat, 2 or 3 of these little McDonald's hamburgers, you're at 1,000, 1,500. Now, how many calories are we supposed to eat in a day? If you take the average man, they should eat somewhere around 2,000. The average female should eat around 1,500. Those can go either way, okay? They could be 1,200 for a female to 1,800, depending on the size of the person. It could be 1,800 for a man to 2,500, depending on the size of the guy. Yeah. Density, bone density has nothing to do with it, only metabolism and the size being fed. So if we took Jeff and we calculated out the amount of calories he needed, would Eric take more calories or less? A few more. He's got a lot more mass to feed. He is taller. Okay, so it makes a difference, the size of the person who's being fed. But that being said, this is important, but it's not always the only key. I had a lady one time who came to me and she was really fit. She was a vegan, she exercised a lot, and she had about 10 pounds that she just could not lose. And so we talked about some of the issues in her life and things like that, and I had her take her temperature and I had her do some other things, and we found out that she had a thyroid problem. Okay, her thyroid wasn't working quite as well as it should, and so we got that working, and she was able to lose that 10 pounds. Okay, 10 pounds wasn't much for her, and it's not much for some of us who have a lot more weight, excess weight on us. And so, but the issue wasn't that she wasn't doing the calories in, calories out. She was eating appropriately and exercising appropriately, but she still had weight that she didn't want. Okay, and so that's what this particular aspect is talking about. Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about is toxic overload. I just heard a study the other day that said that the average person is exposed to over 200 chemicals per day. Okay, so whether it is something that it's in our air, or something that is on our food, or something that we breathe while we pump gas into our car. You see that? And then we can talk about cosmetics, and we can talk about deodorants and our hygienic things and like that. We can have all of these things coming into our environment on a daily basis. Okay? So what we are exposed, what we know, we are all exposed to toxins these days. But we're anyway. Now, here's where they go. Whenever you have a toxin that is trapped or stored in your body, guess where it gets to be stored? In the fat cells. Okay? Have a patient right now who is, well, she was 300 pounds. We've got her down to about 280 now. But we've put her on a fast. And guess how she feels? Ill. She feels very ill. You know why? we are releasing those toxins. As we break down that adipose tissue, we're releasing toxins into her body. You can see it on her skin. She's erupting and she has little pustules and things like that, but she's detoxing so fast that she can't get rid of it through other elimination sources. So when we trap toxins, they're in the fat cells. It's a great insulator. Keeps us away from the toxins, okay? It keeps them away from our vital organs. So it's important that we detox and lose this fat. Sometimes we want to do it slow, but she's in a situation where we really need to get her weight under control because it is drastically affecting the rest of her body, okay? And so she's an older lady and she doesn't have enough time to do this over years. So in the last, I think it's been 5 weeks now, she has lost 25 pounds. Now that doesn't seem like a lot, especially compared to over 300, but before she wasn't able to exercise or anything. Now we've got her walking. It's not far, but we've got her moving. She was in excess of 300 pounds and she was only about 5'2". Okay? So she was almost as round as she was tall. Okay? All right. Inflammation. Inflammation releases all kinds of chemicals. Okay? And so when these chemicals are released in our body, they can cause us to retain fluids, or we can retain certain types of tissues and things like that. This inflammation is key in keeping our immune system healthy, but it also can go haywire in places like allergies, insulin resistance, tissue damage, organ destruction, toxic. This is what we were just talking about, the body's burden, overworked injuries and dehydration. All of those can cause inflammation, okay? And so we want to make sure that we get this under control. If you ever want to see somebody's, how inflamed they are, the easiest test to do is what's called a C-reactive protein. And it is a marker for inflammation. If you have a lot of inflammation in your body, it's going to be high. It's a blood test. It's called C-reactive protein. And you can measure how inflamed they are. Now, that's just one of 4 major markers, but it's the easiest one to measure for. Elizabeth, did you have a question?
Yeah, what's the overworking injury?
Oh, that would be like a repetitive work, something that is strenuous. For a painter, it might be painting overhead, or for a golfer, it's that golf swing. He does that, 18, 20, 30 times in a golf game, and he does that 2 or 3 times a week. That's an overuse injury or something like that. It's a repetitive injury that we keep doing, and it causes damage. I mean, it may not cause damage the first couple times, but as you keep doing it, it does damage, okay? Poor food qualities. We just kind of talked about that with the McDonald's hamburger. Food choices are the key to losing weight. We must cut out junk food and replace it. This may mean choosing better quality of the same foods, versus non-organic. Now, why would organic versus non-organic make a difference? Well, the toxins that come into with our bodies with the non-organic, right? GMO versus non-GMO. But many times, we're not talking about these replacement foods. We're not talking about eating organic strawberries versus non-organic strawberries. We're talking about eating potato chips versus cabbage.
Or just eating plain potato instead of the potato chip.
Right. Right. Because that's not something that's going to be 300 calories per small serving. It's going to be 300 calories for the entire potato. Okay? And so that makes a big difference when 2.5 ounces is 300 calories, which is about half of what your meal should be. An average meal is going to be somewhere around 750 calories, right? And if you eat 300 of that in 2.5 ounces of potato chips, guess what? You only get 2.5 more ounces of potato chips.
And I find that when I'm working really hard and really busy, the thing that I want is something quick, like a cookie or a piece of pie or something that gives me energy that I don't have to worry about fixing.
Right.
So we do get into that grind.
We do. Now we need. I mean, it's a conscious effort. I was talking to somebody this morning, and they said, "Well, I've got this condition, and I'd really like to resolve it. What should I do?" And the very first words out of my mouth was, "Get your lifestyle under control." Because if we add good supplements, because he was asking for supplements, he said, "Okay, what can I take for this condition?" I said, "Get your lifestyle under control, because if we add good supplements to a bad diet, we've done a wash. We haven't cured anything. We haven't gotten you to a point to where you're doing well, because all we're doing is counteracting the bad diet."
Well, this would include fruits versus sweets.
Yeah, and you know the carbohydrates. Let me clear something up real quick. Who knows what a carbohydrate is? Your friend. Okay. A carbohydrate is simply a plant-based food, okay? Because carbohydrates are a carbon-based food. Now, carbohydrates are not in animal products. They are only in plants and vegetables and fruits and nuts and things like that. So is it bad to eat carbohydrates? Now, the definition should be complex carbohydrates versus refined carbohydrates. What is a complex carbohydrate? The way it came from nature, the closest it is to the way it grows, right? What is a refined carbohydrate? It's processed. Many of them are processed to the point that we have a little drop of hard candy and we put it in our mouth and it's 600 calories. Okay? So we can't, and the difference between complex carbohydrates and refined carbohydrates are that complex carbohydrates burn slow. My next class is going to be on insomnia. And I'll just let you take that tape home. It's a sleep aid, that's right. So a refined carbohydrate is one that burns fast. If we're talking about a combustion engine, the difference would be we have a regular gasoline engine, and then we have a rocket. And the different kind of fuel would be gas versus rocket fuel. Now, what happens if we put rocket fuel in a gas-powered engine? It'll burn it up. It's not good for it. It burns too hot, too fast, and it's not designed for that. It's burned for slow. Well, it'll melt the components, get way too hot. Okay? So we don't want that to happen to our body. We don't want to put extra load on them or wear them out prematurely. So we want to eat complex carbohydrates. We must move from high-calorie foods to highly nutritious foods. Okay? Now, does it really matter what kind of food you're eating if you don't digest it? Has absolutely no bearing. Okay? You have to eat high-quality food. But if you don't digest it well, then it doesn't matter. One of the tests that we do on people, it'll show how fast or how slow they digest. And if you're digesting too fast, you're not getting what you need out of it. And if you digest too slow, it could be putrefying before it gets out. And so both can be a problem. Yes?
So, if you have only fruits and vegetables and you're not having any other carbohydrates or protein like beans, can that be one of those situations?
Usually, it's a little bit more complicated than that. It's more of what's going on in the digestion than what you're eating. Okay, so I mean, it doesn't matter if a person's digesting too fast It doesn't matter whether they eat beans or whether they eat fruits. And there is a digestion difference, how fast those digest. But this is a case where it's moving it through so fast. You know, if I said, okay, we're going to start an assembly line, and at the beginning of this assembly line, I want every one of you to take out stuff from these boxes as it comes by you. And I move that thing through there at 200 miles an hour, how much are you going to get out of the box? Not much, right? Now, by the same token, if I move this through at a turtle speed and I say, okay, you can take everything out of the box, and that all you're obviously going to be able to take it out at a turtle speed. But then once that box is empty, what? You've got something that is sitting around, right? It's moving through too slowly, and you're not efficient. Okay, so we want to make sure that you get everything you need out of that food, but your body isn't in a situation where there's leftovers that are staying around longer than they should. Okay, so some of the components to digestion is you know, a lot of us don't chew well, and that leads to a situation where we have large molecules in our digestion that are getting out into our bloodstream. That's a situation called leaky gut. Okay. Leaky gut is where we can actually form allergens to foods that we shouldn't have an allergy to, because the proteins are getting out into our bloodstream, and our body doesn't understand what they are because they're not broken down to a size that they need. Okay? A lack of enzymes. If we continually eat processed or overcooked or even sometimes just cooked foods, we don't have the enzymes. God put the enzymes in the food, but at 103 to 118 degrees, those enzymes, proteins, and things like that are denatured or destroyed. Okay? So we need enzymes. Hydrochloric acid, as we get up above 35 years old, we many times decrease the amount of hydrochloric acid that we produce. Probiotics. We drink chlorinated water. We have antibiotics and things like that. And these things cause damage to our probiotics, to our good living bacteria that's supposed to be in us, okay? And then elimination. You know, there's lots of urban legends. We talk about, you know, Elvis Presley and John Wayne. And when they were autopsied, they found that there was residual fecal matter inside of them that they hadn't gotten rid of. You know, up to about 15 pounds. Okay, how many of you could stand to lose 15 pounds? Poop more. You see what I'm saying? We want this to be an efficient machine, so we want to be able to get rid of that. We should go as many times as we eat. I can see I started the poop jokes. Okay, malnutrition. Did you know that malnutrition can cause excess weight? How many of you have ever seen the pictures of the children in Africa with distended stomachs? Yeah. That's malnourishment. Okay, they're holding on some excess weight. Obviously, that tummy should be a little bit flat and like that, as opposed to distended. Well, we can do the same thing, only we can do it all over our bodies. You know, we're feeding ourselves to death, right? So, but if you aren't assimilating or taking all that you need out of those boxes, you can have malnutrition. If we do not use or assimilate what we eat in our body, that should be we'll do one of two things: store it or eliminate it. I obviously need somebody to check my, yeah. Yeah, as a matter of fact, remember what I said at the beginning? This is the table of contents. We're going to do this over the next few weeks, and I'm actually going to give you work pages that you can use to go through some of these, okay? Write down some of your information. Okay, so then we have a control system over our body, and this is called the endocrine system, okay? And this is the brain and the liver, the thyroid, the adrenals, the pancreas. So we have multiple different organs that controls our metabolism, okay? And the brain is the primary one. It has what's called the I keep wanting to call it no, the pituitary gland. I wanted to say pineal gland, but the pituitary gland. And the pituitary gland is the master gland. Okay, almost every other chemical that's in your body is bounced off of it, and it upregulates it, downregulates it, things like that. The liver is the processing plant. It makes chemicals, it gets rid of toxins, takes care of all of that. The thyroid is your internal thermometer. Okay, it tells you, okay, how hot should you be, how cold should you be. Let me ask you this: if you went out and you went camping and you brought some wood and you stacked it up, but you didn't light the fire, but you kept adding wood to that fire, what would happen to the wood? It would just accumulate, right? Okay, so you need a fire inside. That's right. You'd stay warm by restacking the wood all the time. Okay, your adrenals. Your adrenals are responsible for several different functions: sleep, wake. It is responsible for fight or flight. It's responsible for your ability to stay alert or go to sleep, things like that. So, yes, it makes adrenaline and it makes cortisol. And those are important for you because it keeps you on a pattern. And if they're out, they can cause you to have other problems. Your pancreas is an organ that is responsible mostly for an assistance to digestion. It creates hormones. It creates enzymes, and one of these hormones is insulin. Now, we have a tendency in the United States to be resistant to insulin. Okay, and when we talk about insulin resistance, we talk about several different things. How many of you ever heard of Syndrome X? Okay, Syndrome X is defined by a couple of different symptoms. Number one, you're insulin resistant. Okay, pretty easy to measure. You can either do a fasting glucose, you can do a A1C. So these things are measurable to see that you are insulin resistant or not, okay? The other thing is high blood pressure. A person might have above a 140/80 blood pressure, and a third symptom is middle weight gain, okay? So you have weight around your abdomen, and so this is called Syndrome X. Many times the pancreas is overworked in this situation. The people say, okay, well, I have an insulin deficiency. That's why I take insulin, you know. Well, that's not true. The reality is their pancreas is actually producing more insulin than they could ever use, but they're resistant to it. And so it doesn't do its job, so the pancreas continues to pump more out in order to get the job done. It kind of uses a bombardment type of situation, okay? So there could be something wrong with this situation in order to keep us from losing weight. This is what I was just talking about. There are many aspects of insulin resistance. It causes damage to organs and systems. It increases pain. It is caused by overeating, under-metabolizing the food that we take in. Now, how many of you know that insulin resistance causes pain? Did you know that insulin is involved in what's called the arachidonic acid cascade? And the results of this arachidonic acid cascade is the creation of prostaglandins. Now, if you were to get the most simple definition of prostaglandins, it's pain. It is a chemical pain inside our body, okay? And so insulin is one of the culprits that starts that cascade.
Well, because prostaglandins cause inflammation.
They cause inflammation, right? And they actually do create pain markers. So they're going to create pain one way or another, whether it's pressure or whether it's chemical, whether it's what have you. Psychology. How many of you knew that psychology was part of weight gain or weight retention? Okay? Have you ever heard of somebody getting dumped by their significant other, and what do they do? Comfort food. Yeah. You know, or I know somebody who likes they frequently get depressed, and so they get M&Ms and they call them their antidepressants. Okay. Does it work? Well, momentarily. It gives you that little spike. So, you know, it has some, you know, we growing up are trained by our parents. You know, we might come in crying because we fell down, and mom goes, "Oh, honey, here, have another piece of cake." You see what I'm saying? Or they say, you know, "You're looking awful skinny. You should probably have another piece of lasagna." Well, when we're 45 years old, we're no longer skinny, but we still like that extra piece of lasagna. Yes.
My mom always said, "You're a good girl, you cleaned your plate up." And
See?
now I can hardly eat any food on my plate.
Right.
It's just hard.
It's part of you.
Smaller.
Exactly. So, you know, our training has an effect on our psychology. Okay? Poor self-esteem. You know, I'm already fat, so I'm going to eat what I want, and I'm going to do it until I'm done wanting. Okay? Depression. You know, I was talking about this. You know, if you're depressed, many times you just as soon, you know, have something that makes you feel good, and then, you know, you'll get more depressed, but that's not the point, right? So psychology affects our weight a lot. Genetics. Okay, so I've heard lots of people say, "I'm just big boned." That's, you know, my mom was big boned, my dad was big boned, I'm big boned. That's just how it is. Okay? It's not big bones. Okay, so listen to this. There's an old saying, genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. Okay? When I was in college doing my bachelor's degree, I had to write a thesis paper. And I did it on genetic expression because I was fascinated by genetics. So I found a group of Indians in the Southwest, and I discovered that at the turn of the century, 1900s, they were an agricultural group of Indians. And they had a 1% diabetic ratio in their tribe. Well, shortly after that, the First World War broke out, and they needed the water that ran through there, they wanted to dam it up. The government did. And so they dammed up this water. Well, that affected everything downstream of it. Does that make sense? Well, guess what? These Indians were downstream. So because of that, the government says, look, we will take care of you. And so by taking care of you, the government said, we will give you commodities. How many of you know what commodities are? Processed cheese, rice, and pasta, and canned foods, and this and that, okay? That's what commodity are. It's all processed, right? These people were used to digging in the dirt and growing their own food, non-processed foods. Well, they also said, we'll give you a stipend. We'll give you, every one of you who is above this age, we'll give you a stipend. So they had money. So they had no work, processed foods, money, and no time, and all the time that they needed. What's that sound like? So now I've got money and nothing to do, so I'm going to go and get some fire water, right? Okay? So in 25 years, by 1925, this tribe went from a 1% diabetic ratio to a 25% diabetic ratio. Now, if you look at some of the reservations and like that, those numbers are much higher now. I mean, you look at over here in Idaho and northern Washington, you can see that in some places that number is approaching 50%, right? Or even higher. I mean, it's better than a 1-to-1 ratio. So,
It's almost like that's how it's going to happen.
right. Okay, so the next thing I did in my study was I wanted to see if there was a control group. So I found another tribe that was down south of the border in Mexico that were genetically identical. And they maintained their agricultural lifestyle. And by doing so, they had a 1% diabetic ratio in their tribe. Okay? So they were genetically identical. So what does that mean? It means that genetics loaded the gun, but they didn't pull the trigger. You see that? The tribe in Mexico was not being right. They were not being controlled by their circumstances. They still had an agricultural lifestyle. So we really can't blame genetics for being overweight. What we do need to blame is our lifestyle. And when we talk about lifestyle, that's something that's within our control to change. So we need to change our lifestyle. But there may be some other things that are factors in there also. Okay, so this one's a little bit inevitable, but it makes a difference how we change, okay? So as we get older, systems don't work as well, and if unsupported, they will continue to decrease in function. Digestion, endocrine system, hormonal function, nervous function, increased inflammation. So age can complicate all these issues. However, have you ever seen somebody who was extremely in good health at the age of 80? Okay? It's not uncommon. It's just, and if you look at their lifestyle, that's probably the key issue. Okay? They have maintained a good lifestyle, and so they've maintained good health. Now, if we stop when we're 30 years old, we stop exercising, all we're doing is going to work and coming home, and we sit in our easy chair and watch TV and, have dessert every night, age is going to catch up with us a little faster. Okay? And we tend to blame all these things on aging. Oh, my wrist hurts. Oh, my back hurts. I'm not as young as I used to be. Well, that's because you're not doing all the things you used to do. Okay? When you see an old lady that's climbing, Mount Hood or whatever, she's out there. When you see an old man who bicycles 50 miles a day. I used to have an article, it came out of a newspaper, and this gentleman was 110 years old, and they asked him what he contributed his longevity to. And he said, I look at my plate and I determine how much I think I should eat during that meal. And then I take off about 20% of it. And so he said portion control, in his opinion, was the largest contributing factor to how old he is. Yeah.
Well, that's because free radicals are what age us. If you overeat, that extra food causes a lot of extra free radicals. It's not digested properly.
That's right.
You're loading yourself up with free radicals.
Yes.
But if you are more physically active and whatnot, you actually do need more food in order to cover all the nutrition.
That is correct. However, you'd be surprised at how little more you actually need. Most of us, if we look at our diet and we say, okay, how much food do I need today? And let's say it's Sabbath. We don't need a lot of food to maintain our health for that day. And then let's say we tomorrow is Sunday, and we're going to go out and garden, and we're going to go for a walk or something like that. the amount more that we need isn't significant. Yes.
There was a wonderful study, and I wish I had photocopied it, but it was about mice. And what they did, they had two sets of mice. One set, they fed them every other day.
Right.
They fed them the same amount as they fed the other mice, which got to eat every day. But as the mice aged, those who were fed every other day, even though they ate, they did eat actually more, on the days that they ate. They almost as much as the ones that ate every day. But because, and I'm going to surmise here, but when they cut them open, the mice that ate every day had lots of health problems and clogged arteries and all that kind of thing. But the ones that ate only every other day had clean arteries.
Right.
And you just have to figure that when you're not eating, then your immune system has time to go out and clean up, your macrophages and all that's working. And so when we overload our system and eat all the time, we're causing more free radicals and more inflammation and more problems. But when we make a period of time where we're not eating and let our digestive system rest, then we have other systems that would like to kick in.
Right. So two things on that. First of all, don't use this as an excuse. When my oldest daughter was growing up, I used to say, Ebba, skinny rats live longer than fat rats. And she'd say, yeah, but Dad, fat rats are happier. So anyway, and the second thing is that that when we eat, digestion is job number one. And I've talked about this, about sleeping and things like that. And if you eat right before you go to bed, you don't sleep as well because what's the first job? It's not sleep, right? It's digestion. And so your body is, in lieu of sleeping, it's going to digest. Well, in lieu of any process, blood goes to the digestive system as long as there's digestion to be done. Okay? So you want to make sure that that's one of the reasons that the Spirit of Prophecy says only eat every 4 to 5 hours, because it doesn't take that long for digestion to occur. And that way your body has time to do repair and regenerative and other processes that that can't be done while you're digesting. Dave.
Well, I'm just going to say along with that, Ellen White said most people would be benefited by a day or two of fasting per week.
Correct. That's right.
I grew up with a bunch of really privileged people. Like, we were in South America, and there were these villages that were so isolated that they didn't even know what civilization was. They'd never seen even a bicycle. They didn't know. And there weren't any roads to it or railroads or anything. So we just had to build a little airstrip into the place to get there. Well, anyway, they all had family farms. Every family lived in a little hut, and they'd have to walk every day to their farm and cultivate this farm because that's all they had. There were no stores. They didn't
Mhm.
have any money. And, there was absolutely no disease. Diabetes was unheard of. Of course, no cancer. And they were so strong. The women could carry these huge baskets of produce from their farm. They'd carry them down the mountain, put them in their canoes, go down the river, carry them back up the mountain to their, and their farms were always a long ways away from their homes. For some reason, you had to walk forever to get to their farms. Well, anyway, 40 years later, my husband and I were amazed at these people because the government has started giving them money. And so they got to the place where they were buying, sugar, white
Mhm.
sugar,
Refined
white
foods.
rice, oil. And whereas before for breakfast they were having what was called a plantain drink.
Mhm.
It was something simple from their farms. And they ate lots of greens, tons of greens. And now they're eating white rice and sugar. Anyway, to make a long story short, some of them are losing their eyesight now. Like many of them have
Yes.
And so I was talking to the chief and I said, you know, here are the changes that you have made. You're bringing in oil and you're frying and you're putting sugar. And I said, this is why the people are getting these problems.
Right.
So he says, okay. He says, I want you to tell them. So, you know, we spent a week just educating them. This is why you're losing your eyesight. This is why you're, you know, you're getting sick, and this is why. But here's a group of people who 40 years later
Right.
are hardly even recognizable just in that one generation of changes that have been made. Now, when a plane comes in, it's loaded with the stuff that they've ordered because
Right.
they have money.
So they'd be better going back to their agricultural lifestyle.
And we think we've done them a disservice by building an airship because before
They couldn't get all that in
they
there.
didn't have any access to it.
That's right. That's right.
Where was that at? It's in a, right on the border of Venezuela and Guyana. If you look on the map, there's a mountain called Mount Ararat. It's the highest. They're there. They're real primitive people.
Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about today is optimizing your environment, okay? And when I have helped people lose weight before, this is not always an easy task. I mean, when we start looking into your personal life, I mean, I would go in and I'd look in your cupboards, okay? And I'm telling you, you know, most of this has got to go because it's all processed. And then I look into your refrigerator and there's high fructose corn syrup and there's this and that, and you know, and there's high calorie foods with low nutrition density. I'm telling you, okay, we got to get rid of that. Once we get rid of it, then they don't really have access to it. Until when? Until they go buy it again. Okay, so part of optimizing your environment is changing the routine. Okay, if I were an alcoholic and I wanted to quit, but part of my routine was every night after work I'd go and stop at this bar on the way home. Okay, that's not a good routine, is it? Okay, so I decide I'm going to stop drinking and I go by this bar every night on my way home. You've got to change something, right? You change your route. Don't go by the bar. Don't go by the bar, right? Don't go in there. Don't even go by there. You know, there's obvious. I have to drive a half a mile more out of my way so I don't see that place. Okay, and that's right. So I was coaching a guy not long ago, and I told him, I said, look, you have an addiction to sugar. We've got to get past that. Gave him some support systems to help him with that. But he would stop by the store on the way home, buy a package of Oreos, and have them gone before he got home. I'm going, no. That defeats the purpose. Well, guess what? They fired me. They didn't want me to be controlling their diet that way. But this is a quote from Albert Einstein. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. You can't do that. It's insane. It is imperative that you change how you live and what is around you. Okay? Just heard of a person this last week who came to the realization that they were allergic to their cat. And the next sentence was a little startling to me. I understand loved ones, but she said, that cat is my family, and I'm not getting rid of the cat. I understand that. But, there's repercussions. In that situation, there are repercussions, right? Especially if something's affecting your health, you've got to change. You have got to deal with issues, whether it is going to the grocery store, the way you come home, what you have on your shelves, how you exercise or not. Everything that you do has got to change in order to change your environment. And so this is typically the hardest part of this whole thing. I mean, if you have a thyroid issue, it's a medical problem. It's something that has to be worked through. This is a decision. Now, you still have to work through it, but it's still a decision. You need to change this in order for you to get the optimal advantage out of what you're doing, right? So you must change in order to lose weight, whether that is what you're doing to your body, what you're feeding your body, or what's around you, okay? So over the next few weeks, we're going to go over all of these in depth. We're going to talk about, what should a eating and exercise program look like? How do we optimize our environment? What should we do if we discover that we have a medical condition or what have you? So we're going to talk about all of these issues in depth, one at a time. You can. Right, and you may advertise this. Whether you use overcoming weight or your fat may not be your fault. I don't care. If you want to get people in these seats, that'd be great. Okay.
The farmer's market for Emerson Garfield neighborhood, of which we are a part, is beginning this Friday, and they still had dates open.
Okay.
And somebody could sit a booth and emphasize, or even be the sponsor of the special activities that happen. And they don't have to happen the whole length of the meeting. They only have certain target hours when they make their presentations throughout the
Okay.
time of the meeting.
So it's scheduling on this Friday, or it's starting this Friday?
Beginning.
Okay.
So there is a gentleman that you can contact who's in charge of setting up, and last I heard this, beginning of this month, they still had openings.
Okay.
And I think this fits in so well because the farmer's market is saying, here's food that's local.
Right.
Compost.
Fresh
here's-
foods and like
yeah,
that.
Horticulture.
Yeah.
All
Is
this
that growing vermins?
vermin.
Okay. All right. Well, let's have a word of prayer. Our loving Father, we are in a world that needs this so desperately. And we ask that you open the doors for us so that we are your hands and feet. We ask that you would be the one who is glorified by what we do, and that we would cooperate as fully as we can with everything that you ask us. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.